Ron, I'm just taking us on YouTube.
You're punctual. So we're now live?
One moment.
Okay.
I think we're all set.
Awesome. Well, good afternoon or early evening. It's 5:30. Today is Monday, April 12th, and this is the Town Council Finance Committee meeting. Colette, I'm going to call this meeting to order. Would you take attendance?
I certainly will. Roll call of Councillor Clucci,
Yes.
Councillor Gleistein,
Yes.
Councillor Anderson.
Here.
Thank you.
Excellent. And the primary reason we're getting together today was to talk about the process we want to follow to review the budget that's been submitted to us by the town manager and the school board. And I wanted to do this after we had the actual document in our hands so that we could prioritize who we need to hear or who we want to hear from. I don't know that the meeting is going to be all that in depth or long. We might be able to get through it quickly. Colette, I think, provided a draft schedule that we had looked at earlier on in the process. And what I'm envisioning is that we fill in the gaps, some of the dates. So we have a meeting scheduled on the 21st for 2.5 hours and another one on the 28th for 3 hours. And that's really our primary review time. We have another one scheduled for May 12th, where I think we're going to need to make our final list of recommendations for the town council to consider at second reading. And we're also going to review our debt and capital improvement program then. So with that, I'll I guess toss it out to the committee and see if you guys have any thoughts, if you've got any initial reactions to your initial review of the budget book, which is a very comprehensive document. And we've only had it for under a week now, so I'm sure we haven't taken it all in quite yet, but that's why we have this process, is to make sure we understand what we're looking at before we need to make the final decisions.
So John, is it possible to bring up the calendar that you were just referring to?
Liam's shaking his head, so I'm going to say yes.
There you are.
I believe the school board designation on the 28th is really to accommodate and work around school vacation week to make sure staff and board members are available.
The other thing I wanted to make sure that if there are any special requests that we're going to want from either the town or school department, I think it'd be a good time to give them a heads up that might be coming, if you know about it. And I have a couple myself too. So.
Can I ask a quick question on this schedule? What's the difference between the meeting on Wednesday, April 28th from 4 to 7 and what we would be doing at the joint budget workshop with the school on May 5th?
So what I envisioned, that was a placeholder for the school board. It's not going to take 3 hours. So I actually had us covering other things in that meeting as well.
Okay.
I think it'll be time for them to go over some of the details of their budget, hopefully update us on what they may have learned from the time they pulled it together to that point in time, for where there might be opportunities to save, or maybe something unexpected came up as well.
Okay. I had assumed we were using that whole 4 to 7 time for school board, but I guess it makes sense that we're not, and we can use that time for other areas too if we want to dig into others.
Yeah, it works best to the extent that you have certain departments that you'd like to spend some time with, just I guess as a courtesy to staff, but equally important to make sure they're available for you. To the extent that I can get them scheduled in. We're pretty flexible, but I think to the extent we know, I would love to flesh this out so everyone knows what's coming at them.
So I don't mind throwing out what I was thinking, and you guys can respond to that if that would work for you.
Could I ask one more question? So we talked about the audit and taking a look at that. Is that falling in here anywhere in terms of the presentation to the council or even to the finance committee of the 2020, the fiscal FY 2021 audit?
I'm working under the assumption that we're going to have it in our hands by first reading, by Wednesday.
Yes,
If we don't, we might need to rethink some of this stuff.
Councilor Glycine, I think you're referring to a joint meeting. We typically have a joint meeting with Town Council and Board of Education where the auditor actually appears before you and provides a presentation. That's the so-called, that's the independent nature of the audit and the function. For efficiency, if you don't have other things, we could do it on the 28th of April if everyone's, or I guess not, that would be just finance. I was going to be coordinating that through council leadership this week, actually.
Okay. All right, that answered my initial questions. Thanks, John.
You might consider May 5th, Tom, for the joint budget workshop.
Sure.
It seems the two are related anyways.
It would be most efficient. Presumably everyone has that already circled on their calendar.
Yeah. Okay, so what I have been through the budget book and I was able to dig into some of the details. Some of the areas that, and you're probably all aware that at the end of the day, we need to put together a budget order that looks similar to what we're going to approve at first reading on Wednesday. So it has the departments broken out and then the school department identified separately. There's actually a lot of departments. So I don't necessarily want to schedule 15-minute chunks for each of them, but what I was thinking is I sorted based on general categories like general government, public service, public works, public safety. And the three that I was targeting for our first meeting on the 21st, I thought we're going to go relatively smooth because, if I look at their increase over the past couple of years, it's been pretty modest, actually pretty low. And those were public service, public works, and public safety. So I guess what I'm proposing is for Wednesday, the 21st, we would do those three municipal categories, and that would leave the school board and general government for the 28th. And those were two that were showing more generous increases over the past couple of years. So I wanted to understand those in greater detail. That was my rationale anyways for doing it that way.
Well, one of the things that I was really hoping to do, so you said public works,
Public safety and public service, which is police and fire.
public service. What are you including in public service?
Police and fire.
Okay, public safety.
Public
No, public
service.
safety is police and fire. Sorry, public service is community services, SEDCO.
Yeah, I really think community services is going to need a bit of a spotlight this year. It's very difficult to understand to start with, because we take in the revenue in one year, a different year than we actually do the budgeting. And then, of course, they've been very impacted by COVID. And you're also requesting, really a whole brand new facility in town. That was only supposed to be temporary. So I'm not saying we can't do that all in that chunk, but I definitely want to dig down and understand, the rec department requests more, as well as their reserve fund on the revenue side. What's in it? I know there's a $500 per unit impact fee that new construction, I guess, pays a lot of times, and how with a lot of new construction in town, how is that impacting? But on the other side of the ledger, they maybe got hit by the beach parking last year, et cetera. So I'd like to understand, their revenues as well as their what they're requesting.
I'm agreeable to that. I think that makes sense. So maybe a larger portion of the meeting could be dedicated towards community services. John, what do you think?
I mean, I think what you outlined, John, in terms of the groupings for the meetings, I think are what I was thinking as well. So I'm good with that. Again, I just wonder from 4 to 6:30, is that enough time to cover the first group that you brought up if we need to do more with community services? So is there flexibility to extend that just to give us that buffer if we need it?
We could take one or a piece of one, like maybe we take fire out of public safety and put that in with on the 28th and do Tom, do you have any concerns with breaking police and fire up?
No, I don't. I think, frankly, those three together are probably more than you can handle in one evening. So I think you do need to pull something out of it. And I have no concern breaking up police and fire now.
Okay.
Does it make more sense then to do, I guess, would it make more sense, just in terms of like effort, to have school board and public safety from 4 to 7 on the 28th and have the other three on the 21st?
Kind of feel like, I know this, this comes on Wednesdays, but, I know last year we had to do a number of meetings. I almost wonder if, adding one in here might be of value. I mean, 4 to 7 is it's a long time to go. I'm not opposed to going 3 hours at all, but, I'm wondering if maybe we want to add another Monday in here to get some information, because I know just in general, I'm definitely interested in something we did last year, which is really go through the revenues. We don't really have to do that at the beginning. We could do it at the end. I think that's when we did it more last year, was at the end. But especially, even understanding the assessed value this year and how we're doing that differently. I think that's something the public would be interested in hearing, as well as myself. So it might get tight, just having 2 meetings.
So I just added those two to our last meeting, Betsy, is what I think they might fit well there, is to review revenue and the assessor's update on assessed value, because he might know even more by then.
So on the 28th, you're saying, John?
Oh, on the 12th, on May 12th.
Mr.
On
Chairman,
May 12th. Okay, on May 12th. Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Go ahead, Tom.
All right. I can't there. All right. I'm seeing the bottom now. Okay. Yep. I'm sorry. It was at the bottom of my screen.
I'm certainly appreciative of the interest in the assessed value, but I am very reluctant to have the assessor appear before you. I think he's done a huge favor, done a ton of work, and I've incorporated his work into this. I don't think it's fair to put him on a spot in this context. He's kind of uncomfortable already, frankly.
Fair enough. So you're not expecting any additional information from him prior to second reading? Okay.
No.
All right.
Not.
Can you help me understand that better, Tom? Since this is my first time, like why do we not typically have the assessor come forward and kind of share some of the rationale that they've provided? Because I think that's an important component that we need to make sure we really understand. Or is there some other way that we can get more knowledgeable in that? Because I feel like I need more information there that I don't have.
The assessor's job is to come up with the value of the community, and value is established as of April 1st of any year, but commitment doesn't occur till mid-August. So we're asking him to speculate 6 months before his work is complete. So the timing is problematic, and it always is, frankly. And frankly, you or me don't have any bearing on what that value is. I know it's of great interest, but I encourage you to focus on what you control, which is what we spend. That's the other variable in the tax rate calculation.
Okay.
Yeah, I
Well,
think that's
I mean,
fair.
I'm
This is the
I'm-
first
I'm
time
still-
we've had the assessor come forward at this point to give meaningful feedback like he has. So I'm actually grateful that we've gotten this far. Sorry, John, I talked over you.
I was just going to say because I did go through everything this weekend and I didn't see anything. Maybe John, you can point me, maybe because I looked at everything, so I might have missed it. But where in here does it give us more detail about the assessment?
It flows to the mill rate calculation. So there's a spreadsheet, I forget the actual page number, but I think it's the one that we were talking through. And at the bottom, it gives a mid-range, low and optimistic estimate of the town's valuation for the next fiscal year. This year, that came from the assessor. In previous years, not including last year, we have a policy that takes a rolling 10-year average of the growth. And that's what we use for budget purposes. That rolling 10-year average doesn't work anymore due to the revaluation. So it's commingling a couple of different things. It would have drastically overstated our growth if we'd have followed that policy. So last year we decided not to, and I think Tom came forward with the best estimate he could. And then this year he got a little more refined and actually had the assessor do some work, or the assessor volunteered to do some work. Anyways, I feel like we have probably more comfort level around the increase in assessed value this year than we would typically.
And what is the increase? I made a note. I'm having trouble finding it.
80 or 90 million dollars is what I recall.
90.
Yeah.
And it can, the only place you find it is the bottom of the page of the tax rate computation page.
So John, when you say we brought him along more, what does that mean? You mean just the fact that he did a number for the tax comp sheet?
Correct. Typically, we would not get that from the assessor. He would do his work, in parallel, but working towards commitment in August.
And independent of.
Exactly. And the same is true with overlay. We have a budgetary number for overlay, but at the end of the day, it's the assessor that makes that decision.
And I guess I still feel like at the end of this, come May 12th, to look at this holistically, I personally would like to understand the revenues, like Betsy said, and this assessment piece, because it's a key piece. I'm not saying what that looks like or how detailed we need to get, but just really make sure I understand what assumptions are kind of included and how we got there, because that's ultimately going to impact our ultimate goal, right? So I'm not like what I guess I'm just trying to understand, Tom, is like what is it that you're uncomfortable about, so that we just can make sure that we're not going down a path that isn't helpful, but still gives us the information that we need to help make decisions.
I've provided you the best information I have available through the assessor, what our likely increase in valuation is. There's nothing that's going to happen between now and, frankly, the end of your budget process that's going to change that thinking. I guess I point back to our track record. I think we've historically been fairly conservative at this point for obvious reasons. And so the predicted tax rate, I believe in all cases has been at or less than what we predicted in the end.
Okay. So these numbers on the sheet 19 right now, the optimistic, mid-range, and cautious, those aren't going to change.
They will.
Between now.
Well, they'll change.
In August, right? They'll change. But in terms of what we're going to be approving, is it going to change between now and then? Between the second read?
Not in any appreciable way, such that I think it should affect your decision making.
Well, is there some point, so we have a lot of new valuation that's come into play in town. And so is there some point where it's appropriate to try to understand how the new valuation is so we have a large proposed tax increase right now, which means the expenditures are up, I guess, even higher than the new valuations. So is it at some point, can you give us some more detail on what's come online for value this year? So is that some data that you get annually about what's coming online each year for new valuation?
I can provide it to you looking backwards in the most recent commitment. For the next commitment that comes out mid-August, it's a work in progress. It's literally done, and it works on it right up until that point.
Right, just got started, really, right?
Yeah.
And then he does put a memo out as well that breaks it down in pretty good detail. Split between the type of the value per whether it's residential or commercial, and sometimes
Okay.
even.
Maybe just looking back at all the most recent memos, that would be a help.
Good, I'll provide that to you.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, I know Nick gave one or provided one in, I think, August or September of last year. He sent two different updates. I'm not sure that anything detailed was sent prior to that. I haven't received it anyways.
Nick's style is far more detailed than his predecessors, but there's always been a report from the assessor at the time of commitment. Nick's happened to be a little more detailed than his predecessors.
Okay. So we're getting back to the schedule. I don't mind, Tom, even if we can keep maybe a placeholder there on the 12th. We don't need an update from the assessor, but just your confirmation that, yeah, you know what, that's still the number.
Sure. No,
Or not.
please do that. Yeah.
So we'll add revenue and assessed value to the May 12th meeting, which I think is actually a perfect fit for that meeting.
Okay, great.
And then coming back to where we meet with the different groups, I'm pretty open. So John, you were suggesting moving public safety to the 28th with the school board, and then shifting general government back.
No, I think he just suggested breaking out fire, one or the other.
No, sorry, what I had suggested, John, I think I was suggesting we go with general government, public works, and public service on the 21st, and then have public safety in the schools on the 28th.
I don't have any issue with that.
Would you mind repeating what we're going to have on the 21st, please?
General government, public service, and public works.
Okay, public service. Well, I thought Tom said he thought that was too much for one meeting.
No, I was referring to the initial proposal of public service, public safety, public works. So I think that's workable as you have it now.
So that leaves with the school board, public safety, which would be police and fire, right?
So I don't know where you want to put this, John, but also was hoping we can get some analysis and breakdown of what's going to be the CEA payments this year. I know we've got some coming off. I think this might be the year some are coming off. Some would be increasing. And that's last year, if I recall, that was a line item on the mill rate spreadsheet. So I think like understanding that breakdown would be helpful, and getting kind of an update on where we stand on the CEAs.
Tom, am I correct? That's an assessor number as well, right?
It is.
That calculation? Do you mind covering that on the 12th? Because I know right now it's a kind of a placeholder of what we had last year.
Yeah, the complication with that at this juncture is that a lot of the new value is in fact occurring within those areas. So that's value that's being created for the first time in many respects. Secondarily, the money we pay out is a function of what our tax rate is. And so those are, once the value is understood, you really can't calculate the final payout until you know what the tax rate is going to be. So those are a few of the final items the assessor makes at the time of commitment before the tax rate's set.
Right, but it's still part of the mill rate calculation. We still got to have the detail behind it. I mean, or is it going to just be 1.2 million, or, or is it going to be significantly more than it was last year? Or what number is going to be in a spreadsheet?
We have included updated figures. You can look at Exhibit 6A for those details.
What page?
140.
Okay, I wasn't sure if those were updated.
Yeah, I think that was one of the questions I had.
Those are our best estimates at this juncture. Again, a lot of the new value was created in those districts, so that's a work in progress. And the final payouts are a function of what value is created and what the final tax rate is going to be. So just appreciate those are our best estimates for budget purposes. They will be refined at commitment.
Okay.
So let's see.
It does look like there was a generous overlay in the budget as well. So those all kind of might compensate for each other. But do you
Mhm.
mind if I leave a placeholder for if anything, glaringly significant comes up between now and May 12th, that you'll bring it out there?
Certainly. And I might suggest that I encourage the assessor to do some of his early work in those areas first.
Yeah.
To make sure that we have our best estimates in that regard first.
So I guess so you're saying then, okay, wait, I'm looking at the wrong line. Okay, so we're saying then that there's no change in what we're going to pay out for the credit enhancement agreements between 2021 and 2022.
That's what's in the budget. I think there will be a change.
So
I don't
can
think we know what the amount is though yet.
yeah, but can we get some idea what the change is going to be? I mean, there's got to be some estimate, right?
Councilor
Tom, correct-
Gillespie, that is the work that is underway as we speak. A budget is your best estimate of performance. And as we have better information, we'll update these figures.
Okay, so then can you tell us then what was the final CEA payment last year? If this was budgeted last year and we didn't have an exact number of 1.242709, then what actually was the payout last year?
I'm sorry, I don't have that off the top of my head. Of course, I can provide it to you.
Okay,
It'll be in the annual statement too, Betsy, which we should receive this week.
that
Or-
would be really
yeah.
helpful to have that, but I just think so I think at one point you did give it like in the affordable housing, somewhere you gave us an update on the CEAs pretty recently.
Yep.
And what's still owed on the CEAs. So, I just think maybe an update on that, would be of value as we talk about the, this part of it, the revenue part.
Can I just ask a question? Because I'm trying to track the conversation and I'm not sure I fully understand. So Betsy, right now in the 2021 budget, there's the 1.2 million for the CEA. And then there's another 1.2 million in the budget for 2022. Yet there's been a lot more development and work. So Tom, is that not considered between this year and last year when coming up with this CEA line item in here, or should it be including additional value?
As our process progresses here, I will bring to you updated figures as information gets better. So this is one area that I may well be in a position to bring updated and more accurate numbers to you, and I would expect that number would go up.
So we
And
do
so that will
expect it
increase
to go
that'll
up.
increase our expenditures. So
Yes.
then the numbers that we have here will likely, that 77124 is actually probably higher. How much higher? Like, I know it's not an exact science, but are we talking like from a 1.2 to like a 1.3, or are we talking a 1.2 to a 2.2, just in terms of scale and scope for how much this might go up?
I'm not even going to hazard a guess, but I would say it's the former, not the latter. It's not that order of magnitude different.
Okay.
Keep in
So it's
mind,
small.
if that's the case, we've seen increased value created, 60% of which goes to the bottom line. So there's a more than equal benefit to the overall valuation. If you're talking down specifically, and that's the big one, it's a 40% payout, meaning 60% stays with the general fund.
So we'll also see an impact on the revenue side to offset whatever increase we're going to see
It's
on the
not
expenditure side.
not in revenue, it's in total value, thereby keeping your tax rate lower.
Got it.
Yep.
So I
And
think
at 1.2, it's not just the downs, right? It's also the
Right.
where we did the improvements by the Beacon. I mean, they weren't involved in it, but early on. But I'm sorry, what I'm trying to say, Cabela's, and that's the one that's coming. That's the one that's going to be done. Is it this year or?
No, I believe it's FY23 will be our final payment.
Okay, so we got one more on that. All right.
No, but the biggest change will occur in the downtown district. The other one was essentially at full value last year. There might have been some small value created, but not appreciable. If the big change agent will be the downtown district.
Right, and I think, the kind of the discussion about the assessor along with this, CEA is, what you're saying, well, they've provided this increase in value along with this increase in payment. So I think, getting into some level of people understanding, how that works, I think would be helpful, when we're pulling these numbers out.
Well, I guess my observation for you, and take it for what it's worth, is that you've got 6 weeks or so to get through this budget. You need to choose what you want to focus your time and attention on. And I'm pleased to help support you how you want to spend your time.
Right. And the line above it, the TIF district, that's going to also go up, right? Because it's 3% of new value. So that line will also go up above 174 is what we're expecting.
Councilor Gleisten, I'm not prepared to go through a blow by blow discussion of that, all these details tonight. I'm sorry.
Right. So, but we are expecting that to go up. Would you say that's accurate, or you're not sure?
I guess I'd expect some modest increase there, yes.
Okay. And that's the one we have a little bit of control over potentially if we wanted to modify the TIF agreement with ourselves. Okay, thanks.
So bringing us back, we're not intending to review the entire budget here, but just put together the schedule for how we will review it. And I added on the May 12th to include a review of revenue and just an update on the assessed valuation and any changes to the TIF or CEAs that we know about at that point in time. Back on the 28th, we updated that to include both the school board and now public safety, which would be police and fire. And on the 21st, we've got general government, public service, and public works with a deep dive into the community services proposal.
In general government, that's admin, HR, kind of anything that doesn't fall into, is that what we're counting as general government?
Yes.
Yeah, there's a lot of buckets there.
Okay.
Including assessing, I think, planning, finance, HR, and executive.
Okay.
Yeah, I suggest we plan on that. And if you need to push some of those departments, you may not get through all of it. We'll find a way to be flexible and bring them in.
Okay.
I have a question for the school board, knowing that we don't necessarily get into the line item detail because that's not our purview. How does that one different from what we would be doing with the other departments in terms of, what we would discuss there? Because again, when I look at their budget, similar to ours, there's some areas that are clearly a lot higher that's in the budget book. So do we give them some guidance too on where we want to focus, or how does that differ?
So we look at the line item detail. We just don't have authority to change it. We only control the top line number for the school department.
And is
Hope
that
that helps.
also, John, do we kind of separate that out? Is that both operational and capital, or do we look at that separately?
The capital, we do have line item authority.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought. And so, never mind. I'm going to wait to see. I know I'm sure you have more to say on this, John. I did have a couple of requests on the process as we go forward, but I'm not sure when the appropriate time to make the request is.
So I was going to segue into that. So if you want to do requests either for more information or process, bring it out.
Okay. Yeah, so as we go through this, we know there will be changes, and on page 148 is the Town of Scarborough next year, current year budget analysis, FY22 summary. And one of the things I was hoping is this one, I would say, that marks the 7.6% increase. I would mark that one in time as first read, or manager's budget. So that it doesn't change. But what would be really helpful, I think, is as we make changes, and let's say community services is reduced by some amount of money, so their increase is now not 35%. It's something less than that. If we could keep these numbers up to date, to the extent that we could kind of see how they're changing from first read, that would be helpful. I think this summary sheet, although it certainly doesn't tell the whole picture because it doesn't have the revenue side, but it does give a good overview of where the money is going and the increases or decreases as we see in the town debt.
So I guess maybe a comment on process will help too. First, this is both the town manager and the school board budget. So Tom doesn't have authority to change the school board's budget. So what's coming to us is from both.
Just page 148, John.
Oh.
It doesn't include any school board.
Okay, I'm not
It's
looking
only
at
page
148 right now. Okay, that's fair enough.
Yeah, sorry.
And then the second piece of that is once we get through first reading, this is now the town council's budget, right? To be worked and eventually approved. So procedurally, how we want to track and communicate the progress that we're making towards whatever goal we're going towards, I feel that's up to us. I don't know that they're going to change the budget book at all, but if we want to have a snippet or an excerpt where we're saying this is what was presented to us and this is what we know at a given point in time, I think that's totally within our purview to do that or to request staff to do that. You're saying you want to keep a similar format to page, was it what, 148?
148.
We can certainly do that. In fact, I think we do that. The challenge is typically Finance Committee doesn't formalize its recommendations until your final meeting. And so it's not as if we have a kind of a running tally, so to speak, unless you change what the historical process has been. It's traditionally been much more consensus, but no final decisions until at the very end of your review process.
Gotcha.
I actually do like this. This page though, is it something that we can get like the actual Excel version of, just so that we have it for ourselves again as we go through the conversations and can just kind of keep our own tallies to prepare for the meeting that we have on the 12th?
I'll have to talk to the finance director. This is a function of our Munis software. I suppose it can be converted to a Excel spreadsheet easy enough.
Okay.
If that's what you're looking for, that kind
Yeah, I
of
just think it would be
high level.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful to have, like, to be able to actually play with.
So along those lines, when we have the different departments come to us and present their proposals, is there any information or specific requests that you guys would like to have them include with that presentation or discussion?
I actually really liked watching the school budget workshops, how they gave some guidance around, I think it was like, I can't remember off the top of my head, but it was like, what is retain versus, supplement. Like, I feel like if we could come up with like those 4 key things that everybody could just kind of think about as they put their presentations together to just help us understand the increases. Like a lot of the increases that I saw when I went through, a lot of it looked like it had to do with compensation and people and salaries and things like that. So that's probably like one bucket, but like, are there other buckets that we would want them to come forward with just to organize their thoughts as they kind of bring their stuff forward?
One way we use, and it would be easy for them to report on and consistent, is restoration and new initiatives.
Mm-hmm.
If that's helpful, that can be a common theme that each person is prepared to start their comments with.
Well, on the town side, I think, and it may be in here and I just may not be understanding it, but I think, a number of positions in the detail that we're covering, and in number of new positions that we're covering. And I don't think it applies on the town side, but maybe a note back to the schools. So we didn't create any new positions with any kind of federal or COVID money, right, Tom? Or
No,
either last year or this year. But the
not,
school,
not with federal money. I'm proposing 3 new positions on the town side that would be locally funded.
okay. Yeah, so just I think
that-
understanding like how many positions that these that the compensation makes up, whether it's 5 or 10 or and then plus one new one, would be a help. And I think on the school side, when we talk to them, John, maybe we have to write down a little more and just send them a note. But I think their picture for with all the COVID impacts is a little harder to follow. So if they could specify, what is in the budget that they from last year that might have been funded through COVID money that's still in the budget, no longer funded through COVID money, or and then what they're expecting to hope to perhaps fund through new federal money this year. So like, I think their picture in terms of a question I get a lot is, well, what's staying in the budget that was funded through COVID money, either local money, because we did carve out a certain COVID money last year, especially for nurses. Did all those nurses stay in the budget? That type of thing. That's a question I'm getting asked a lot. Like what got added to the baseline from COVID expenses? And I don't think it applies on the town side. So I bring it up for the school side.
So just going back to the ask for how we organize. Tom, I like restoration, new initiatives.
Mhm.
I guess one thing I would want to add in too is like anything that's like truly required or mandated, that just kind of, again, is not something that we actually have much wiggle room for. So I don't know if like there's some contractual things that we're obligated that have a increase. And again, on the school side, an example that I would expect to be kind of in the required bucket, maybe when they were talking about how the state is now requiring, for special services, I think they're now increasing the age to 20. So they have to meet some sort of state mandate now going forward that's going to impact their budget. Like that's what I mean for like the required element, things that like we really need to do because of state mandates or, any sort of contractual obligation that we don't have flexibility on. And then to Betsy, to your point, like understanding a little bit how the new federal grant money, and again, maybe we don't know the exact answer right now, but like which items might the federal grant money help offset? The town might have a harder time with that than the schools at this point, but just really trying to understand where they're thinking that federal money might be allocated.
John, with that one, I was thinking a little more generally, and just are there any we know there's a gap between the 3% that the council's goal is and where we are today. Are there any opportunities that you can see or provide to help us close that gap? And I think a creative use of federal funds would certainly be one possibility. There may be others, which would get us to, I think, to 3: restoration versus new initiatives, and then something that may not have been included with the original proposal. But do you see any opportunities to help close the gap? And I think what I'll plan to do is reach out to both of you around a week before each of these review sessions and solicit questions that you might have for the departments that are going to be coming up, so that we can at least provide them to the people that are going to be presenting by that weekend, by the Friday.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, because that way, maybe as soon as we get them, if it's not too broken up, maybe we could just send them on to the committee and to Tom, so that probably the more time, the better.
Yeah.
But it might be coming more than one, more than one sweep. So maybe that's, would you prefer it kind of in one chunk or just kind of send them as they start coming up? What's your preference?
Guess what I'm picturing is a shared document that, has each of the buckets broken out where we can put our questions underneath, and then staff would have access to that so that as they come up, they can see it.
No, I like that. That's good.
So if we're having the meeting on the 21st with those first few groups, I guess how much time does the staff in the town need to kind of, like, what would be like an ideal time to have those questions ready so that they have enough time to prepare for the meeting on the 21st?
Depends on the nature of the question. I mean, I expect my staff will be pretty good on their feet and experts in their budgets. But if you're asking some detailed question that may require some extra research or extra analysis, I guess selfishly, I'd look for it the Friday before the week that we're meeting.
I think it's a fair ask. I mean, I don't have my questions, so I don't know if they would qualify that way, but I just want to make sure whatever we give you guys, Tom, that you guys have enough time, that we're not just giving them to you the day before and then people are scrambling.
Well, and then maybe we can include the questions in the packet. So that, it gives some purview or preview of what's going to take place in the meeting.
I really want to encourage all of you to resist the temptation to dive deep into the minutia. It's so tempting, and I'm sure we will nonetheless, is to really try to focus your conversation, your thoughts on the high level, the things that really matter. I'm just trying to be efficient and focused with your short attention on this document over the next 6 weeks.
Well, so I guess that leads to a process question. So if we are going to meet the council goal of 3%, Tom, do you think that you're going to come forward with proposed cuts for us to consider, or are you expecting that we might be digging in and looking for those cuts? So I was kind of thinking it would be a little of both, but probably more you coming to us saying, okay, if we get to this target, these are the things that we can't do, so that we would be able to consider those. And would that be in these department meetings where by, say, the 21st, you would say, I'm really thinking we can't do the House of Lights lease, if we're going to get to the 3% or something like that. So that's, in terms of a process, if the council wants to reach its goal, how do you see that looking, or do you see that happening more towards in the later May timeframe?
It's typically done later. I fully expect that I'll be intimately involved, but I need some guidance. Right now there's a $3.4 million gap. I hope you're not suggesting that you look to me to come forward with proposals to meet that, to fill that gap. So I guess I'm pleased to put the work in with some basic guidance from this committee.
Yeah, I guess, and that's where I was going with the, identify any opportunities to close the gap. And I think the town manager would bring forward, or bring to our attention anyways, what he sees, as I would expect staff would. And remember, there's some moving pieces, and some could go in both directions right now. But then at the end of the day, I'm hoping when we have to, buckle down and come up with our final adjustments for the council to consider, that it's not a $3.4 million gap, that we've narrowed that considerably. Because I think that, us making those decisions, while we have to do it, right? I think if staff can eat away at a good chunk of that before we're in that position, I think it would be well suited for everybody.
Yeah. So Tom, would you want, like, just for working, not necessarily for, like, that's our goal for you, but if we just said, you came in at what, a 9.6% increase. So if we were to say, show us like what it would mean to be down to a 5% increase, would that be helpful to kind of just scope the conversation to get it to a point where we can all know that that's kind of what we're looking at? And then again, from there, we can make decisions on going up, going down, or whatever we need to do. Is that what you mean in terms of guidance? Or
Yeah, some order of magnitude target is always helpful as opposed to,
okay.
I mean, I fully intend to bring things to you as better information comes forward. And as John alluded to, I think there are some fairly significant things that they're going to move this budget. So the conversation is going to shrink over time. But there'll come a point later in the process, I suspect, where there's a remainder gap to the final gap to get through. And at that point, it's really important for there to be a clear understanding for all involved as to what the expectations are to get there.
Mm-hmm. So do we want to, Betsy, John, do we want to give Tom and the schools some sort of target for the conversation? Again, not to like say that's where we're going, but at least just to kind of say, you know, town and schools give us a 5%, like what it would look like if you only had a 5% increase on expenditures.
So I don't, only because we're going to have to make that decision at some point, but I feel like doing that before we've had the benefit of the process and hearing from each of these people would be premature. We could all come out with numbers, and you can slice the budget in any number of different ways, but I think it's important to hear from the people who put together the budget, what their thoughts are and what their priorities are, to help inform that decision. So I would be reluctant to give specific guidance before we at least go through some of that process. And as we near the end, then we probably will have to say, that this is the gap, and town versus school, this is what it looks like. But really, we're establishing the budget. So at that point, it's not so much tell me what it looks like, it's here's your budget.
Mm-hmm.
So
I'm just trying to see what would be helpful for Tom. Like, I just want to make sure if Tom needs something that to help him and the staff that we're, helping. But Tom, you kind of give us your thoughts on what's going to be most helpful.
Yeah, I want to make sure that there's a level playing field, going forward. What I've put before you is a product of my senior staff and myself, and it really recognizes the impact of many of the decisions we made in the current year. And I have no regrets in having made those, but I just want everyone needs to appreciate there are consequences of those decisions. And frankly, I think the town took more of a brunt of that than the school in the past year. So I wanted the conversation to start appreciating what those impacts are. Just one example I'll bring up, we already know some good news. The school seems very clear based on the guidance they have with the federal dollars that nearly $500,000 of their request is going to get pulled out because they have another way of funding. I think it's 5 positions. So I suggest we let some of those things evolve. And again, you have my word, I will.
Is there a thought that we might not make the 3% council goal, that's going to be different this year?
I mean, it's a council decision that helps guide our work.
Please recall this year, the council set the overall goal, but they also deferred to this body, and it's the 3 of you, to sort out some of the sub goals. And one of the key takeaways through that process was a goal of restoration. So that, from my perspective, that's what I've given you. That's the starting point of the conversation.
Yeah, I think that's fair. That's what we wanted to see.
So I guess in terms of the departments, another thing that it would be good to see if we're talking restoration is impacted last year, that would be helpful to have that from the departments.
So now you got us to 4. Somebody had mentioned 4 key themes, and I think that just got us there, Betsy. So restoration, new initiatives, opportunities to close the gap, and services that were cut in 2021.
we're not going to have much to report on services cut, same level of high quality services. But there's a lot of other stuff behind the scenes that we knowingly, purposely cut out. That's just not sustainable over time to think that we can continue with that.
Right, but I think there was some, we had fewer office hours, so I mean, that was one that the office was, it was a cost savings, and that, if people want, people have to realize, okay, in order to have the office open from 8 to 4 and the extended hours on Wednesday, these are all things that take money, right?
Mhm.
The training, what kind of, training did our folks miss? That we normally would have expected having. I think, for people to understand some of those impacts. And I think there was something that, on the, a spark, but
Mhm.
just for people to understand how what some of those impacts were, even though if they might not have actually felt them, or, well, I never went to the office on Wednesday anyway, or whatever day, so it didn't matter to me. Well, it mattered to the people who had a tough time, so just some of those things that we changed in order to reach those levels would be of help.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, a big one that comes to mind is we only had kids in person at the schools 2 days a week, right? That's a pretty big drop in service levels. And I think before and after care was probably impacted as well. So,
John,
I think it's good to point out.
Can you talk about your third bucket that you brought up again? Because I just feel like we need to be clear on what we mean when we say, like, I feel like restoration, new initiatives, those are pretty clear. But your third one, again, I still want to make sure we're giving good guidance on what we're looking for that one.
So opportunities to close the gap, is that the one?
Yeah. So are you looking for people to come prepared with things that they would suggest, or would it be more appropriate to say, based on your increases in your overall department, help us understand like the relative priority, like what's number one, what's number two, what's number three, so that we just get a sense from them, like what are the things that they absolutely feel like they truly would prioritize versus the things that are still probably important, but if they had to make a choice, those things would fall to the bottom.
So I mean, when we establish the budget, they're going to have to make some of those decisions with the budget that we give them, right? All I'm talking about with opportunities to close the gap, and they can convey their priorities when they do the presentation, but this is exactly what Tom mentioned about the school department understanding that they can fund 5 positions from federal funds, right, for a savings of $400,000 to $500,000. Well, there you go, 3.4 just went to 2.9. If the legislature passes something where now our schools are going to get 5 million instead of 4.4 for state aid, there you go. There's another 600,000. So those are the types of things that I'm looking for them to come forward with, and it might be simple, something as simple. I've got to hire 100 people next year. There's no way I'm going to do that by the first, starting July 1. So maybe we can stagger some of these in, and that's an impact of X. Or maybe there's a new program that can generate additional revenue. Those are the types of things that I'm thinking about that I think they're much better to bring to our attention than the reverse. And then I'm hoping that narrows the gap so that when we do go back with more specifics, it'll be a little less painful.
Mm-hmm.
I had 2 other things that I'd like to request. I gave Sarah a heads up on this earlier, but the municipal budget includes a forecast for the current year for FY21. And I found that very informative or helpful. The education budget did not. So I'm going to reach out, and if you guys agree that that's something that would be helpful, I would like to see that for the education budget as well. And then the other piece is I'd like to see what we've actually spent through the 3rd quarter of this fiscal year, which just closed, a week and a half ago. So those are 2 pieces that I think would help me to get a better understanding of where we are today and where there might be some opportunity or not. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts or if you're in agreement that they'd be worthwhile.
That would be helpful.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Are there any other pieces of information that you anticipate that you'll want as we go through the process that you know about now.
I think this is a
Well-
good start.
Yeah, and I think we already touched on it, and maybe it's just for the three of us at this point, but to go ahead and start that document so we could start putting stuff in it.
You think a Google Sheets or a Docs? I'm new to some of this technology. You think that you have a preference? Maybe a spreadsheet?
Yeah, sheets.
Okay.
Google Sheet.
Yeah, then we can categorize it.
Would you like us to initiate that and share that out with you?
I would love it.
Yeah.
Okay. We can do that.
Okay.
John Clucci, will you be reaching out? You alluded to the fact you talked to Sarah. Do you want us to go back to the school on those additional, I guess, the forecasting requests you have?
Yeah, I can't see. I think Kate was possibly going to join us today. But yeah, I want to put her on the spot anyway. So that's something that, yes, you want to coordinate with me how we can formulate
Okay.
that request?
Yep.
Okay.
And then third quarter expenditures, I assume you're looking town and school alike, right?
Yeah, by department.
Yep.
Yeah. Or at least by department. I'll take more detail if you have it, but yeah, primarily looking by department. Okay. I feel like we've covered the budget process and review in pretty good detail. Is there anything else that you guys wanted to include? Go ahead, John.
I think one of the things, John, that you had mentioned we were going to discuss was whether or not we felt like it was appropriate to shift out the vote a few weeks,
Right.
based on the feedback we got from some of the community. So I just wasn't sure if we were going to have that conversation.
I think that it's a good time to segue into that. So the school budget validation referendum is currently scheduled for June 8th. We have some flexibility where we could move that date if we chose, because there isn't a primary also taking place on that day. To do so, Tody would like to have an automated count, which means we have to order ballots from the state. And to hit the June 8th date, she needs to order them this week. So it's a decision that we kind of need to make soon. We had a resident suggest that we maybe push it out. We had some feedback after our last council meeting from the high school principal, pointing out some of the downsides of pushing it out. And it mainly relates to staffing in the schools, where they wait until the budget's approved to do their hiring process. And the further you move from the end of the school year or beginning of the next school year, the number of candidates tends to dwindle, because the good ones try to lock up their jobs sooner. So that's kind of the introduction to it. Do you guys have any thoughts on keeping it or moving it?
The other thing too is we have the 60-day clock in the charter. So if we move it out, I think, we can have a discussion, but we can't, like we did last year, we had a presentation, we had discussions about the budget before we started the 60-day clock. So that would have to be, at first read. Technically, I suppose we could table it and then do first read later or something. I don't know what Tom's thinking here, but we do have that 60-day clock.
So I think the clock's for second reading though, right?
No, the clock starts at budget presentation, which was, last week, but last year when we were wanting to get more time, we actually went ahead and we had the town attorney, and he said, you could certainly have a presentation and then, accept the town manager's first read, at first read. So I think that's kind of the way Tom broke it up this year. And so, presumably that clock would start from Wednesday. Is that your take on it, Tom?
I know what we did last, in the current year. No, my take is the 60-day clock started last Wednesday.
That's the way I read it too, Tom.
Which, the charter, as you well know, has provisions for what to do in the event that the council fails to take final action before within 60 days. So I don't think that's necessarily hugely problematic.
Well, the provision is that the 7 not at the first, what you presented last week would have to go to the voters. that's the provision.
No, I don't believe that's the way it works. I believe until such time the council approves a budget, until you take action. And then in the school's case, and the voters approve it.
Well, if the 60 days started last week, then we have to approve an amount within 60 days, or else I thought the charter says it goes back to the amount that you did at last week's presentation.
But that gives you the opportunity to move, if you wanted to move second reading to like June 2nd. Because that's when we approve it. It's not when the voters approve it. And then you could have the referendum at some point after that. But I mean,
Before we even go there, though, I mean, can I just say I think we should try and keep it on the date of the referendum. I don't think we should necessarily change it at this point. I think, perhaps the biggest unknown at this point is the federal funds, and I don't know if we shift it, if we're going to know any more or anything significantly more. So I think we should just commit to keeping it on the date we have it and just stay the course and move forward and do the work we're supposed to do over the next.
Federal funds, which they did, but there was no way to know what they were going to get at the time we ended up holding the referendum. So, I think the more time.
Days to issue that guidance, which I believe is the second week of May. The date escapes me, but we're all hopeful we'll get that sooner than the full 60 days.
we need to do the work anyways.
Yeah.
Right? If we get some help there, then fantastic, right? But I don't know that revenue is the biggest issue that we're facing right now. Honestly, I think it's expenses.
Well, on the school side, I may have misunderstood it, but I thought those 5 positions were closer to $1 million that they were talking about using, which is
No, it's $420,000.
okay. But
I
it's
think-
it's 980 something thousands out of that.
They're quite confident that will qualify. Is that it's going to be exceedingly difficult, likely, to use it all. I suspect we'll be needing to use them over extended. Understand where in our budget can we have it come in to help.
Really important, and people are bringing it up, and when you look around and other towns are pushing out, you kind of get a little why, what's going on, so that's my thought. So no, I'm not unaligned. So
Fair enough. So,
Just to be clear, John, I don't believe that date is in the budget order. So I just didn't want anyone surprised by that. And you're correct. There's no action item currently scheduled on the special meeting this Wednesday on that topic.
don't we usually have an action item to establish a referendum date? Does that come closer?
There is, it's a separate action of council setting the election,
Okay.
but it's not incorporated as part of the budget order.
So I'll make some phone calls and see if there's any interest in pushing it or keeping it so that we can at least, well, I don't know what we can do, honestly.
so when we do that order, Tom, then is that just a formality because the ballots have already been ordered, or the ballots don't get ordered until we actually take our action?
Tody wouldn't order the ballots until she knew. And she would far prefer doing electronic tally rather than hand count. So depending on what your rescheduled date is, we still have to respect the absentee period and of course getting ballots prepared and printed as well. So
Yeah, so I understand those things, but I'm just saying, so when are you proposing that we would set the referendum date at the council level if it's not in this budget order? When in your experience would it happen?
I'm trying to think just on the top of my head. It's much closer to the election. In most cases, there's other matters on that ballot. In many cases, local matters, and so all of that's part of the council action in establishing the election and agreeing on what's going to be on that ballot. So I can coordinate with Tody. She'll know exactly, but it's a date much closer to the election. This long lead time really has to do with the extended absentee period and getting electronic ballots prepared and available.
So it sounds like we do have more time to assess if we need to. So can we just maybe like do we table this here now and just wait to see in a few weeks where we are? Or I guess I'm just trying to get at what point do we need to make a recommendation from the finance committee if we feel like as a committee we need to change it?
If you want to stay with June 8th, we need to order the materials by the end of this week. So if you're doing something other than that, I can't answer definitively without consulting with Tody. I think the option she would choose reluctantly would be to do hand count and not worry about that lead time.
And what's the reluctance with the hand count, or what's the issue with the hand count besides it obviously just being very painful and having to have people manually count?
That is it.
Okay.
I wouldn't go so far as to say accuracy is an issue. Tody's very thorough, but it's just man hours and also election results. That may not be as important if we're just talking school ballot validation vote, but I can tell you when there's candidates on the ballot, they like to know as soon as possible when the results of the election.
Mm-hmm.
So this June 8th, the only thing, at least at this point, that we're expecting on the local ballot is the school referendum, nothing else.
Correct.
So, yeah, I would say maybe not to order as early so that we can take this matter up.
I wish Tody were here. She asked if she should be, and I guess I should have said yes. I think she will do it, of course, whatever you wish, but I think this will cause it to be a hand count, which again, we will staff accordingly and we'll get it done.
But she does need to know by the end of this week if it's the 8th or not.
If we are to stay on the 8th, yes,
Mhm.
And do an automated ballot.
correct.
She needs to order it this week. I'll
Yeah.
poll some counselors to see if there's, I mean, just within the finance committee, I'm not seeing a strong desire to push the date. So if there's no strong desire to push the date, I'd say that she's probably okay to order them. Understanding that if new information comes up, the council can shift the date because, at some point that's going to be in front of us. And that
Mhm.
would mean we've spent money to order the ballots and it's going to require a recount. I mean, a manual count.
Just if the issue here is making certain that we have clear guidance on the federal money and thoughtful discussion around how best to use that. I'm quite confident, given the amounts the school has and frankly, the clarity that they seem to have already on the school side, that's not so much an issue for them. I don't want to speak for them, but that the fact that they've already come forward and acknowledged that over half of their allotment can come out of our budget, I think is very telling. On the town side, I think we're going to have guidance before you make your final recommendations and certainly before second reading. So I think we can react to that. And I'm not concerned that's going to be a problem, frankly.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that. I think that's, I think we can move forward with whatever information we have at that point. So, I think we should just keep it on the 8th.
Excellent. So I'm with you, John, there. Any other budget process or review items that we may not have covered that you guys were thinking about?
No,
I'm sorry?
no,
Oh.
I'm just excited.
Here we
I don't know
go.
if excited's the right word, but definitely ready to dig in.
So I believe we do have some members of the public here. I'll open it up to any public comment. If anybody wants to give us feedback or speak to budget process or review.
Liam, can you stop sharing, please?
I don't
And
see any hands going up.
well, thank you, everybody. I think this was productive. I took some notes. I'm sure Colette did as well. And I think we helped to refine what our strategy is going to be for reviewing the budget. With that, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Colette?
Counselor Clucci,
Yes.
Counselor Glystein,
Yes.
Counselor Anderson,
Yes.
motion passes.
Have a great night.